Meeting up with the West London Classic Ford crew. All three of my old banger Ford Escorts won't screw onto the end of that adjuster. Quite a lot of oil coming out of the filter on this catch can. We've got 1, 2 bolts missing. Wasn't going to be able to get on the other bolts was missing. Been spitting out loads of bolts. The crank sensor is wiggling. The engine wasn't sitting level. The alternator belt had fallen off. Now there is one other thing that I've done around the front of Maude today, and she's gained some extra carbon fibre. They are very subtle pieces of carbon fibre. Can you see them? Hello and welcome to this video. I'm Marcus Hayes, and today I'm planning to go round to my other garage where I usually store this car, Esther, my ST170 powered Mk1 Escort, to do some bits on this car and probably Maude, my moredoor Mk2 Escort. Now I'm up super early this morning because I'm actually starting the day by meeting up with the West London Classic Ford crew to attend one of their legendary breakfast meets. As I've said before, if you need to find out about where all the decent meets are happening in and around London, the West London Classic Ford Facebook page is the place to find out about said meets. So definitely go and give them a follow on there. Hello, so it's now a lot later in the day and I'm round here at my other garage with all three of my old banger Ford Escorts out. Now I've got to be honest, when I got round here earlier, I was a bit slow to get going. It was immediately apparent that I was going to have to do at least a little bit of tidying up before I can even think about messing about with the cars. First thing I did is I started actually utilising this new toolbox that I've got. The black one did have a chest on top of it, that was over here, and then I'd recently moved this into this garage, but I hadn't started using it yet. But because this one pokes out further than the black one, I thought it'd be better to have this one nearer the front of the garage, and I've basically transferred everything from this black one and the chest that was on top of it into this toolbox, and the chest that was on top of it. So I've got that over here and I'll be taking that home in Maude later on. Also coming home with me is a load more parts that I've found that I'm going to get rid of. So yeah, plenty more eBaying to do. I am now gaining a lot of space in my garages, which is good, and it just shows that yeah, I haven't been utilising the space that I've got at all. Now once I've done a bit of tidying up and dug out those parts to get ready to sell, I then started thinking about what I want to do on the cars. Now, the first thing I wanted to crack on with is to fit this adjuster for my bias pedal box to this car. I was thinking of having it, you know, mounted here, and then basically this is just a cable. This was actually given to me by my friend Lee Booth. Massive thanks again to you if you're watching, mate. And yeah, essentially it's a cable that attaches to the bias adjuster on the pedal box, and then you can literally adjust your brakes bias, you know, from front to rear on the dash. But unfortunately, this is a Willwood cable, and my pedal box is a GARRY one. And I've just got this fitting in here because I've been trying to figure out what thread it is. But yeah, basically this won't screw onto the end of that adjuster. So I'm going to have to get some sort of adapter or just buy the GARRY adjuster. But yeah, I'm going to try and do it by buying an adapter. Now, one thing I have noticed about Esther recently is that I seem to be getting quite a lot of oil coming out of the filter on this catch can. Now, that could mean that there's too much crankcase pressure in this engine. I'd like to think that the seals in the cylinder head are okay, because that's a freshly rebuilt cylinder head from A.L.DEVELOPMENTS. So potentially, maybe my bottom end is worn, you know, the piston rings. I did today empty the catch can. There wasn't much in it, you know, you can see how much is in it from this sight tube, but I just thought maybe the can's a bit too small, so, you know, I emptied it, but it's still doing it. You can see residue there, and there's a tiny puddle down there on the chassis. Now, this thing doesn't smoke when it's running, so I don't think there's anything catastrophic happens to the engine. But yeah, it looks like we might have too much crankcase pressure. And in fact, earlier at the meet, this actually came off. I never bothered doing these up with a spanner. So yeah, that had come off, and there was all oil sprayed up against the bulkhead. So yeah, I hope this engine isn't about to die, because it runs absolutely fine. You know, it's still nice and strong. As I say, there's no smoke coming from the catch can filter. The oil that came out earlier wasn't overly milky or anything. You know, you do tend to get a bit of condensation in the catch can anyway, but yeah, it wasn't, you know, overly milky. This is a cheapo can, and there's not a baffle in it or anything, so that could be the issue. I don't know whether I should try and put like a bit of gauze in the pipe or something to sort of act as a baffle. I don't know. But as always, interested to hear your opinions. Feel free to put them in the comments. Hello, into a new day. Now, I mentioned that on the last day of our island trip, it sounded like a couple of bolts fell out of this thing, and I wasn't able to identify what bolts they were. Nothing seemed missing when I had a quick look. But yesterday, on the way to the West London Classic Ford breakfast meet, it sounded like another couple of bolts fell out, and I don't think I mentioned that when I was filming yesterday. But also, what I noticed the last couple of times I've driven this car is there's a lot of vibration through the chassis. And the other day, when I had my beautiful girlfriend Kat in the passenger seat, I was basically lifting the engine, you know, as best as I could with my hands, and she was able to hear that the vibration went away. So I instantly knew that the vibration is being caused by the sump sitting on the cross member. Now, I have actually got the weight of the engine supported by the hoist, so the engine is sitting higher now, and yeah, you can see that there is a bit of a gap there, but that was literally sitting on the cross member, that corner of the sump. And I really hope that that's not cracked or damaged, but I'll have to see once I've cleaned it up properly. Because if it is, I'll have to take the sump off, clean it out, and get it welded. And if you look up here at the passenger side engine mount, you'll see that we've got 2 bolts missing. And this was all, you know, bent. It sort of seems more in line now, although there is a gap between the mount and the block there. You know, it's more in line because I've taken the weight of the engine. And this other bolt in that mount is also starting to back out. So that's definitely the bolts I probably heard either on the last day of the Northern Ireland trip or yesterday. And that is why the sump is hitting the cross member. There is oil everywhere, and that's probably because the cross member has been touching the sump, and it's probably put pressure on the gasket. When I had the engine out last, I changed the rear main seal, and since then I definitely noticed that there was a little bit of an oil leak from the back of the engine. So the oil leak I had before I took the engine out last time was probably the sump gasket and not the rear main seal. So I was planning to change the sump gasket anyway, but yeah, we'll just have to figure out whether I'm gonna need to get the sump welded before I do that. I was just about able to start threading the missing engine mount bolts in by hand, and then I used my electric ratchet to drive them in properly. But unfortunately, I wasn't going to be able to get on the other bolt without first removing the starter motor. So I disconnected the battery and then disconnected the wires from the starter motor. And then I found one of Esther's starter motor bolts was missing.
Esther has been spitting out loads of bolts.
With the one remaining starter motor bolt removed, I could then remove the starter motor itself, and then I used the open end of a spanner to re-tighten the other engine mount bolt. And I decided to do all 3 engine mount bolts up FT. I decided to give all of Esther's sump bolts another 1/8 of a turn, just to see if I could get away with not replacing the sump gasket. Time will tell. And whilst the starter motor was out of the way, I gave the sump and the engine block a thorough clean with brake cleaner. But then I noticed another problem.
Alright, so I just noticed that when I was cleaning, this was able to wiggle. So I've unplugged it, that's the crank sensor by the way, and the crank sensor is wiggling. Now unfortunately it's not the bolt or the screw that holds this to its holder, it's the holder to the block. If I can get the camera in there, maybe you can see that it's the actual holder that's moving. I don't think you can get to that bolt without taking the gearbox off. And obviously if that sensor ends up moving away from the flywheel, then the engine won't run. The more I look, the more issues I find. That's what happens when your car's been built by an idiot.
It was time to put Esther back together, so I refitted her starter motor and reattached the wires for it. But when I let the engine hoist back down, I could see that the engine wasn't sitting level. So I undone the nuts on the engine mounts, both sides, and then lifted the driver's side of the engine up only, and then fastened the engine mount nuts back up. And then once I dropped the hoist again, the engine was sitting level.
Alright, it's all of a sudden starting to get dark, just as I was under here giving things a final clean. But yeah, progress has been made. I can now see the extent of the damage on the corner of the sump. I'd like to think that I probably just about got away with it. It wouldn't have been long before it chewed through those welds on the corner and through the alley. But yeah, given the block a clean and the sump a clean. Really disappointing about the crank sensor holder. Yeah, I did try and get in between the flywheel and the block with a Torx Allen key, because that's a Torx bolt that holds that in, and yeah, I couldn't do it. I wouldn't say it's impossible, but it's nearly impossible to get in there. I think I might actually end up having to remove the flywheel to do it. But yeah, starter motor and stuff is all back on, as you would have just seen. And now that everything's clean, I can just see if that sump gasket is still going to leak. As you would have seen, I just nipped up all the bolts. But yeah, I've got a feeling I'm going to have to change that gasket.
One thing I forgot about, and I didn't even mention it to you guys earlier, a couple of minutes away from my garage earlier, the red light came on this car, the battery light. And yeah, when I got to the garage, I discovered that the alternator belt had fallen off. So yeah, had to put another one on. Luckily I had one in the garage. It's a bit big for my liking, but I was able to get tension on it. So happy days. Another thing I forgot to mention earlier is that I've been in touch with GARRY, the company that supplied the bias pedal box that's fitted to Esther, and they've told me what thread the adjuster has on the end of it, so I can get an adapter to hook up my bias adjuster.
Hello, into a new day, and you join me round here at the garage at home, and I've been cracking on with a couple of bits on Maude. I mentioned in the last clip that I had to replace the alternator belt, and I actually forgot about it until I jumped in Maude to leave the garage that night, and yeah, saw the battery light, so I had to change the belt in the dark. And then when I was on my way home, and then also on the way to the gym after that evening, I could hear what sounded like, you know, bits of something falling off the car and hitting the floor. And I thought, oh, you know, is Maude now, you know, spitting bolts out or whatever? But when I got to the gym, I had a look in the engine bay, and what I discovered still hanging in the engine bay was the old alternator belt, which, as you can see, is still intact. I just assumed it snapped and fell out completely. Now, it appears to have worn all the way round, so it's sort of lost, you know, one edge of the belt.
But it's really weird how that has been able to come off the pulleys, because the tension on the belt should mean that that's impossible. Anyway, this belt is actually a bit longer than ideal, and now that I've got this one, I have actually got the number on it, so I could order a brand new one this length, although this doesn't appear to be rubbing anywhere. With this alternator belt setup, you've got the pulley here that's adjustable as well as the alternator, so you can sort of fiddle about with, you know, tension and have the belt running where you want it, so that it doesn't rub on this and doesn't rub on the bracket there. But that's definitely close, so you know, I'll leave it for now. If it doesn't rub or anything, it'll be fine. If it does start rubbing anywhere, I'll have this one in the car as a spare anyway, and yeah, I can use this to order a new one. Now, one thing I've done today is I've added the Jubilee clips to these pipes that go to the new catch can, so that's all finished. I still do need to figure out how I'm going to attach a breather to this, and I actually found a breather in my other garage, so I won't have to buy a breather, which is good. But for now, at least it can breathe through that hole. Now, there is one other thing that I've done around the front of Maude today, and she's gained some extra carbon fibre. They are very subtle pieces of carbon fibre. Can you see them? They are, in fact, the headlight bowls here, the same as what I got fitted to Esther, my Mk1 Escort, and these replace the chrome ones that I did have fitted. Now, those carbon rings were supplied by my friend Gary Ball, and I will leave all his details in the description. If you need any carbon fibre for your car, definitely get in touch with Gary and let him know that I sent you. So yeah, really subtle pieces of carbon, but another bit of chrome deleted, which is good. There's a little job I did on the middle of the car today, and that is to paint the B pillars there and there matte black. When I painted this back area, I basically forgot to do those bits, and they were still green and they were bugging me. But eventually I will be ripping out this headlining, so then I'll continue the paint job up the pillars and obviously paint the inside of the roof as well. But that can wait for another day, and I know there's going to be some sound deadening on the inside of the roof that's probably glued there, and I'm going to have to do a load of sanding and stuff. So not looking forward to doing it, but definitely looking forward to having the whole of the interior black rather than having the cream headlining. Now, around the back of Maude, I've made a change that I've been meaning to do for ages, and that is to fit these boot springs to replace the rubber type latches that I had before. And those boot springs were very kindly given to me by Montgomery Motorsport over in Northern Ireland. Massive thanks to you guys, and I will leave all their links in the description as well. If you're anywhere near Clocker Valley, I think it is, over there, they've got an awesome shop with loads of really cool race and rally parts in stock, so definitely check them out. For a while now, I haven't had Maude's boot lock fitted. In fact, it's up here on the roof, and normally these have a clip that basically hold them in, that's just a tight fit, and yeah, the clip just kept falling off, so I just decided to remove the boot lock. But the other day I tapped the end of it so that now it can just be screwed in with this nut. The problem is, when I went to refit this, it wasn't actually engaging with the catch in the boot. Now, this bit here is supposed to spin round when you turn it with a key and engage with the catch, and it just wasn't reaching it. So I tried to bend the bit of metal on the catch so that it was closer to this, and then I broke the catch. So I've had to order another one. I actually ordered one this morning on eBay. So when that arrives, then hopefully I'll be able to figure out a way to mount the lock and the latch into the boot lid so that they do engage with each other, and then I'll have a boot lock again. So yeah, that was just a couple of bits that I wanted to do on Maude before I end this video. In the next video, I'm probably going to be doing some more bits on Esther, because I've got some parts to enable me to do those. Very soon, I'm going to be taking this thing for another day of sends at Aldershot Raceway, so I need to dig out some drift tyres. In a few days, I'm making a video on someone's cars, one of which we have seen on the channel and one of which is really cool, that we haven't. And yeah, I'm planning to meet up with the West London Classic Ford crew again for an afternoon and an evening of fun with them. But for now, I'm going to end this video here. If you did think it was any good, please do give it a thumbs up and a share. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. Click subscribe if you're new. Feel free to follow me on Facebook, TikTok and Instagram. Massive thanks to my patrons for your ongoing support. Don't forget to check out my website for merchandise and parts. But yeah, other than that, until next time, thanks for watching.